Hey everyone, welcome back to our SwiftUI series. Today we're diving into implementing Apple login as well as added biometric authentication, Face ID or Touch ID. By the end of this video, you'll know how to authenticate users with Apple sign-in and ensure a seamless biometric experience. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Just as a note for this one, in particular with the biometric, you can use the simulator. However, I find if you have a real phone to test on, so I have my iPhone SE3, it typically works best. As well, for the Apple login, you will need an Apple developer account. So just prefacing this one with that, but we'll go ahead and get started. I also do plan on adding a Firebase login video, probably right after this one. I had someone comment that they were interested in those things, so happy to share my knowledge when applicable. All right, so I'm going to add a new iOS app here. So I have my Apple ID example in SwiftUI. If you want to add to an existing project, feel free to do so. I'm just going to start from scratch here. So what we need to do before we kind of get started is to go to our signing in capabilities. So I'm going to press on the kind of app icon at the top of my project navigator. I'm going to click on the targets, signing in capabilities. So if we press the plus button on capability here, we should be able to search sign in with Apple. Looks like I do need to just re-sign into my account real quick. So as I mentioned before, you will need an Apple developer account for this. If you don't and you just want to test it out, you'll probably just get an error. When I was testing this before without having my signing certificate being activated, it gave me error 1000, which I'm pretty sure is just a generic error, basically being like, hey, you haven't incorporated Apple ID sign-in. If you don't have automatically managed signing enabled, you can head on over to the Apple developer account. Let's pull it up on Safari here. Once you've signed in, under the program resources, you can go to the certificates, IDs, and profiles. Then you go to the identifiers tab here. See the Apple ID example that we've just created is here. We should be able to click on that. And we can see that this is enabled. And we can even edit it here if we need to. But if you don't have an Apple developer account, you can still test this out. So maybe if you're still considering purchasing the developer license, you can still test it. You'll just get a little generic error. All right, let's hop on over to our content view here. And what we need to do is import a couple things. The first import that we're going to do is the authentication services. So this is going to allow us to sign in with Apple. And we also, since we're doing biometric, we need to import local authentication. So import local authentication with a capital N-A. So this is for biometric. In our content view under the struct, let's create a few state variables. We'll create a Boolean value to see if the user is authenticated. We can also use a Boolean value to show if the user has successfully logged in, maybe through an error, or even if you want to have a successfully logged in message, up to you. And we can also have that error message because sometimes with the different ways we're logging in, it's a good idea to kind of have a flexible string. If the password's wrong, if the biometrics are wrong, Apple ID, no internet connection, things like that. It's a good idea to keep that under a string. So let's go ahead and create that state variable here to see if someone is authenticated. So state private var, and then we'll say is authenticated. We'll have this be false for default. We don't want people to, hopefully just be logging into our app after all. Let's also create the private variable for the error. So show error. And let's have this also equal false by default. And then the last one that we talked about was the error message. We'll have this be a string, and we'll use our question mark operator there. Let's forget the capital S. Cool. All right, we're gonna do things a little differently than we normally do. We're gonna start out with kind of creating an if statement, because when we're thinking about creating a login screen, we kind of want to have an if condition if they're logged in, and then we want to have something if they're not logged in. You can also kind of just create these buttons and then, if authentication is true, move them onto a different screen. For my example, I'm going to make it very, very basic just so we can kind of see how it works. So I'm going to say if is authenticated, so that state variable we created above. And my brace, we can add some text. And we can say, welcome back. And create it as a large title, so do font. Large title. So here, instead of just having text, I would actually put like the logic once the person's logged in. So like logic for, taking the user to the rest of the app would be here. So like, here's your login screen, and then if they're authenticated, we're gonna move them into the home screen, maybe their profile page, right? Any logic once they are authenticated, go ahead and put it here. I'm just putting some welcome back text so we can know that it works. We can even add a button to go back if we want. So I'll add a button, and the action let's have is authenticated equals false. So we'll just call this one sign out, just to simulate what it would be. So this button here is just going to allow us to, kind of test a little bit more. All right, and let's handle our else condition. So this else is going to be what the user sees when they're not authenticated. So if authenticated is false, this is what they're going to see. So we're going to add our Apple ID button, and then we'll add in our biometric sign-in button. All right, so we're going to create a sign in with Apple button. And because we've imported the framework, it's already going to allow us to access that code. So sign in with Apple button, and then we're going to add our brackets dot sign in. There is also a sign up button you can do here. So sign up. We're going to do sign in. Then we're going to add our brace. We're going to say request in. We'll add another space here. And this is where we're going to configure the request for Apple sign-in. It's going to request the user's full name and email. So I'm going to say request.requested scopes equals, and this is where we want to put in the full name and the email. So we'll do dot full name, so we can see a scope that includes the user's full name, and we'll use comma space dot email. I'm actually curious what other ones we can grab. I think it's just full name and email. Yeah, seems to be that way. Cool. And you can see that we're missing the argument for parameter on completion at call. So outside of this brace where this error line is, let's go ahead and add on completion. We're just going to get rid of the kind of sample code here, and we're going to say result in. And this is where we're going to now handle request of the Apple sign-in process. All right, let's go ahead. Oh my God, our button is huge. Look at that thing. Wow. Okay, we'll definitely have to add a frame to that because that button's like 90% of the screen. Anyways, let's handle the request of the Apple sign-in process, and then we'll get in there and we'll do handle Apple sign in, and then we're going to put the result within those parameters. So this is going to be a function that we're creating later on. I'm just going to call it handle Apple sign in. We'll create that function a little bit later on. Because my button looks so absolutely cursed right now, what we can do is we can have the button style as well as the frame. So outside of this brace here, we can do dot sign in with Apple button style because we're using that sign in with Apple button. Let's have this be, let's see what we can do. So for this one, we can have 3 different styles. Looks like we have black, white, and white outline. Let's see black. I think that's the default one. We can also give it a frame. We're going to set this height. Let's do like 50, and hopefully that should shrink it all the way down. And then what we can do is we can add some padding. Okay, let's go ahead and now create that function. And this will also allow our content view to load once that function's been created. All right, so let's go all the way down here and we'll create a function. And we're going to create our handle, Apple sign in. And we do have the parameters with this one. So we're going to do underscore space result. And we're going to add a colon and we're going to say result. We're going to use our kind of angled bracket here, AS authorization. So for me, it's this fourth one here. This is the encapsulation of a successful authorization by a controller. Then we're going to put a comma. Then we're going to say error with a capital E, and then we need to add in our other kind of square, and then we'll add in our other angled bracket and kind of close that all together. All right, because it is a function, we will now need to add our brace. And this is where we're actually going to create a switch for being successful. Oh, you can see our UI updated and our button looks much better. We need to add a case if we're successful or if we're unsuccessful. So we'll use success and failure. So I'm going to create a switch. I'm going to have this be the result. We can then add a brace. We'll say case dot success. And within these brackets, we're going to say let authorization. I can never remember how to spell authorization, but I think that's right. I'll add a colon here. I'm going to say if let underscore equals authorization dot credential. We'll then say as question mark. We're going to use the AS authorization. We're going to use the Apple ID credential. So this is a credential that results from a successful Apple ID authentication. That's exactly what we want. We're going to add our brace, opening brace right after this. So this is going to mark the user as authenticated if the Apple ID sign in is valid. So we'll say is authenticated. We're going to have this equals true. So we're referencing that state variable that we had created above. Because this is a switch and we only have one case, we need to, of course, add another one. So after this brace here, I'm going to create a new case and we'll do dot failure. And we'll have an error. So I'll say let error. Outside of the brace, we're going to add that colon, and this is going to capture and display any errors from the Apple ID sign-in. We'll have our error message that we created above. We'll have this equals error dot localized description. And we'll say show error equals true. We're going to create a pop-up for that so the user knows why they weren't able to log in. You can also print this error. So you can definitely say print Apple ID error, and you can interpolate error dot localized description as well, so you can see what's going on in the console. But we'll definitely have that pop up as well. Alrighty, so if we were to try to sign in with Apple, we don't really have anything that's going to really work in the simulator. I find it works best when we're using a physical device connected to the internet. But before we get testing, let's go ahead and create our biometric login. All right, so we're going to do similarly what we did with our sign in with Apple button. So after that one, let's go down here. After the padding we added, let's create a new button, and we'll say button, include an action, and we'll create a new function in a minute, and we'll say authenticate with biometrics. A brace here, we can add some text for what the button's going to display. Login with touch / face ID, or whatever you want it to say. We can add a frame here, so we'll do dot frame. That's max width colon dot infinity. That should make it stretch out as far as we need to. We can add a background, set the color to be purple, whatever color you want, of course. And the foreground style to be color dot white, which will change the text on the button. And if you're a fan of the channel, you'll know I love me a corner radius. All right, let's go ahead and now create that function, and we're going to call it authenticate with biometrics. We're going to add our braces. We're going to add an empty bracket, and then I'm going to add the brace here. And this is where we're going to essentially handle the basic biometric authentication. So we're going to create a context, and we're also going to create an error. So I'm going to say let context equals LA context. And this is basically going to allow us to use the user's device biometrics. I'll do the quick help real quick with option control. And it uses this to evaluate the user's identity with either the Face ID or the finger touch ID. I'll show you the touch ID. I already have it set up on my iPhone. So as long as the user has that set up, you'll be able to access and use that information to sign them in and prove that's that person. We're then going to create a variable called error. We're going to do :ns error, and then we're going to add a question mark there. So now we're going to check if biometric authentication is available. So we're going to say if context that we created above dot can evaluate policy. Now I'm not going to use the autofill because I actually want to add my own information in here, and I'm going to do dot device owner authentication with biometrics option. Then I'm going to do comma error colon. I'm going to actually use the ampersand, so shift 7 error. Then we're going to add a brace. We'll have our reason, so we'll say let reason equals authenticate with Face ID or touch ID. I don't know if there's a space between those things. It might be Face ID and touch ID like this, actually. I don't know. I guess I can always find out. All right, next we're going to attempt to authenticate with biometrics. So we're going to do context dot evaluate policy. So last time we did can evaluate policy. This time we're just using evaluate policy. And we're going to do dot device owner authentication with biometrics once again. We're going to do comma localized reason. And then we're just going to add our reason that we created above, this let reason. Cool. Then we're going to add a brace here. We're going to say success, comma, error in. All right, we're going to add some space here, and we're going to add some code. We'll say dispatch main, or sorry, dispatch queue dot main dot async. We're going to add some code. We're going to do an if-else statement. So we're going to say, if the user is successful, we're going to mark them as authenticated. Else, it's going to show an error if the biometric authentication fails. And we can test this out. So if success, so this is going to, if successful, mark as authenticated. And for our purposes, we're going to set our is authenticated that we created in our state variable up here to be true equals true. Go to the end of this if statement and we'll add an else. We'll add our brace here. And from here, we're going to show an error if not authenticated. All right, so we'll say error message equals error dot localized description. I believe for this one, we do need to provide a nil coalescing operator, and we'll say biometric failure. Or you can say, incorrect biometric result, something like that. And we're also going to have our show error equals true. We haven't created that pop-up yet, but we will in just a moment. Now what we actually need to do is go to the end of our if context here. And we're actually going to add an else statement, which is going to show an error if biometric authentication is not available. So you can either double click on the brace of this if statement, So for me, after that else statement that we created down here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 braces, create else, open it up, and this is going to show an error if biometric is not available. And for that code, we can actually just copy and paste this error message because it's going to have that localized description. So we can just have both of these things pop up. Next, let's actually create that pop-up. So we're going to go to the very end of our VStack. So for me, it's right above that padding, and we're going to create an alert. So I'm going to do .alert. And in the brackets, we're going to say is presented. And we're going to reference our show error. So we're going to use a binding. So we're going to use our $sign here, show error. Outside of the brackets, we're going to add a brace. This is going to show an alert if authentication fails. So alert. We can use the title message and dismiss button one. So for the title, I'm going to go ahead and have, oops. So for the title, I'm going to have some text here. It's going to say authentication error. And then comma message. I don't know why my autofill didn't fill all these things in, whatever. Colon text. We can include our error message. We can provide it with a fallback. So I'll do the double question marks, unknown error. And then we can also dismiss button. Okay, and we'll set this to be .default. We can add the label here. So within these brackets, we're going to say text, add another set of brackets. We'll just have to say OK. Alrighty, so this is going to essentially allow us to have that error pop up with those error messages that we've referenced before. Our button looks a little cursed. I'm just gonna add some padding after the text. That should, okay, yeah, it looks much better. So you can test this on the simulator. Like I said, I typically have a lot of issues, but I'll just show you how anyways, and then we'll hop into using the real device. Okay, so we can see that we have it on the simulator. So if you have the simulator open, you should be able to go to the Features tab at the top of the screen here, and you can see that there's a Face ID. You can enroll, and you can select whether there's a matching face or non-matching face. So this will allow you to simulate if the person is authenticated or not. So if we select this to be non-matching face, biometry is not enrolled. I mean, it says enrolled to me. I have a lot of issues with the simulator here. It doesn't love me. But when we press on the sign into your Apple account, it'll go to this thing. You need to sign into your Apple account in settings, and you can do so here through the simulator. I'm just going to show you on my device because I'm already signed in. Most people who are using their iPhone and downloading things from the App Store should also probably be signed in on their Apple device. So let's go ahead and see it in real time with my iPhone. Okay, so I have, you can see on the screen, but it's also on my iPhone here. So I have the sign in with Apple button. I'm going to go ahead and press that. Has my email. I might blur these out for privacy reasons. And you can see that we can sign in to Apple using our existing Apple accounts. And you can also actually continue with Touch ID through this, which is through Apple sign in. Great. If I hit, so I canceled out of it because then we have the error. If you're getting like the error 1000, it just might be because you don't have the Apple ID authenticated through the developer portal. Let's go ahead and log in with Touch ID and Face ID. So I'm actually going to first use my wrong finger. It's going to give try again. I'm going to use my correct finger now, which is my right thumb. Then we have our welcome back, and I can sign out. So I can, test this as many times as I want. Of course, for your applications, take the user through the proper authentication. Once they're authenticated, have them, properly use the application. So that's how you can use Apple ID, or you can use Touch ID. I don't think I have Face ID set up on my iPhone, but if I did, I'd be able to use that too. They are one and the same. So as long as the user has those things set up, you can use those in your application, which is pretty cool. I know this was a bit of a long one, but I find that, you know, a little bit more detail rather than too little typically goes a long way when you're doing the tutorials, especially if you're adding these things into your application. As great as the documentation can be, you know, I always find it's nice to have like a visual example and have someone kind of explaining their steps along the way. So that's it. We've implemented Apple Login alongside Face ID for seamless user authentication experience. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what feature you would like to see next. I have some things in mind, but yeah, if there's anything anyone wants to see, let me know. Otherwise, dream big, code bigger, and have an amazing day.